If you can't take 2 weeks off and disappear, you're not ready to scale. You're only going to copy your mess in a different town or across town or in another spot. You're going to regret that. So telling somebody not to scale when as entrepreneurs, we're kind of wired to do crazy things like that, hard for them to hear why.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Executive Edge Live. I'm Harley Green, founder and CEO of Workergenics. Now, at Workergenics, we help high-performing leaders reclaim time and focus by pairing them with ultimate executive assistants who reduce operational drag and increase leadership bandwidth. These sessions are one way that we support the broader business community with real conversations about what actually works at scale. Today's conversation is going to be focused on vision and planning for scalable growth. Very appropriate here for the new year. You know, a lot of leaders, they don't really struggle with vision so much as they struggle maybe with the bandwidth side of things. And when everything runs through you and your calendar is full, even strong plans and vision can stall. So today we're unpacking how leaders can set growth targets that are ambitious but executable, plan around real capacity, not just hope, and reduce leadership drag that quietly eats 15 to 30 hours a week so that you can build planning structures to support execution and not just strategy. You'll hear practical insights from real-world experiences and honest trade-offs from the leaders who've built growth plans that hold up under pressure, our amazing panelists. And a quick note before we begin, today's session will also be featured on our podcast, Scale Smart, Grow Fast. So if something resonates with you today, you'll be able to revisit it again in the conversation later, wherever you get your podcasts. So let's go ahead and dive right in and get to know our panelists. Justin, let's start with you. Go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm Justin Janowski. I run a company called Faith to Influence, and I help Christian coaches and entrepreneurs as my primary target audience with high integrity sales strategies. I know that many people who are building businesses are trying to figure out the right pricing, the right irresistible offer, and the right sales strategy to grow. And for my audience specifically, sales is the thing they want to do the least, but they need the most. And so I help people do that really well in a way that feels good for them and their prospects, that has integrity, and makes it easy for the right people to say yes.
Thank you so much, Justin, for joining us. Josh, how about you?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Josh Santiago. I'm one of the managing partners of a firm that I started called Santiago & Company. So we are a management consulting firm that specializes in helping mid-market enterprise companies isolate and identify portfolio value across the entire chain and then really dive into that. So this is a conversation that's near and dear to my heart because I spend a lot of time helping organizations, even at the very top, uncover these issues and really dial it back. So it's nice to get back into the small business side of things and help give back that way.
It's great having you here today, Josh. All right, Philip, how about you? Can you introduce yourself?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. And Harley, I appreciate the invitation. Super cool to be on the panel with all these cool chaps here. I run an advisory firm that handles bookkeeping so that business leaders can get their numbers on time. It's a frustration for a lot of us. And then on the backside, we also do exit planning advising, which deals a lot with building value in the business and expanding the valuation on the company before an owner decides to exit.
Thank you so much, Philip. And last but certainly not least, Brian, go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you. Brian from State 4. I'm the principal and lead strategist. I've been in the agency and consultant space for like 25 years now and worked across a variety of spots, American Express, Google, YouTube, Toyota, like all kinds of things, but also smaller companies as well, and focus now predominantly on the construction and industrial space. So that's kind of where I found my home at this point in time.
As you can see, we've got a power-packed panel here today. So let's just dive right in with the first question here. This is open to everyone. So if you've got something you want to share, please just jump right in. And the first question today we're going to focus on is scalable growth. When you think about scalable growth, what do you see leaders most often getting wrong in their planning?
I'll jump in. The number one thing is they think it's going to happen faster and less expensively than it really is. Whatever your number is, probably you should add 50% on time and money.
And I think the other thing too that I see is capacity. I think planning around capacity to hit scalability is another one. It's a huge underinvestment. Everybody thinks they've got unlimited bandwidth, and we all love the 5 to 9, but it's one of those things that you've got to balance capacity as well across the organization.
If we're looking at leaders, and I think a lot of what you're focusing on is leadership, I think it's important to identify the difference between leadership and management. and what role you're filling within that. And too often people focus on the what and the how instead of the why and the where. And like as a true leader, if you focus on that, where we're going and why we want to get there, and then you either offload or collaborate with your team for the what and how, like that's the only way it'll work in the long term.
For me, I'll add that sustainability is one of the key components to make sure that leaders are thinking about is how can we grow in a way that's sustainable, a way that feels good long term, that supports the lifestyle that we want to have, the business that we want to have, the culture and the values of the business. And so it's about having the right people in place, the right systems and processes so that the scaling isn't just an exciting moment, but something that's lasting and done the right way.
That
And
scaling aspect, it's not like a final destination either, right? It's like one of the problems is people just look at what's that end goal instead of looking at like what are the milestones to get there, but trying to do your goal setting or even just do goal setting at all, right? Like it's crazy how often people don't even set goals. They just say like, we're going to grow, we're going to do whatever. But like not only setting an end goal, but what are the stage gates to get there so that you can do quality checks as you go?
one of the things I kind of heard here in this discussion was sometimes leaders can underestimate the amount of effort or resources it'll take. Why do you guys think that is? If people, I mean, especially people who have been in business more than a year, understand that things are a lot harder than they often see on the surface. So why do leaders continually fall in that trap? And maybe what are some tips or strategies you might offer for them to be more realistic?
Well, a lot of leaders are visionary types. So they see the big goal, they see the big picture, they see where they want to go, and they're great at communicating that. There's oftentimes a charisma around their capacity to communicate that and sell people on and get people excited about it. But many leaders are missing the kind of integrator down to the earth analytics of like, what's it actually going to take to make that vision come alive. And so I think oftentimes partnering with team members and trusted advisors, coaches, mentors, and others who can see what has to actually happen to bring the vision to life is really important. Many visionaries just have the big idea and they start sharing it before the path is clear.
I think Justin brings up a great point, right? It's the marriage between the visionary and the integrator. If you look at a lot of great companies throughout history, right? Apple, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, Microsoft, Bill Gates and Paul Allen, there was always the strong visionary and equally strong executor. And I think that becomes such a hard thing to do sometimes when you're just getting started, or even though you've been in business for a few years, is finding somebody that you can tie yourself to who's not only going to help push the vision forward, but also is going to bring you back to reality sometimes. And you're like, yeah, we're going to grow 40% next year. It's like, well, we don't even have the staff to do that. Hold on just a second, right? Finding the two is super helpful. Great point.
And I'll just add that as an entrepreneur, the fundamental thing that allows us to do what we do is also an Achilles heel, and that is this. Entrepreneurs are like adolescents in their inability to assess risk.
Well said.
We are willing to leave the house without a bunch of guaranteed green lights to get across town. And there are other people that need to know that every light's going to be green when they get there. As you're saying, you need somebody to help compensate for your positive success wiring.
I think one way to mitigate against that, I totally agree 100%. I mean, that's something actually when I started this company from my last one, made like a lot of self-assessment of like, what's my risk level and how do I protect myself from myself kind of thing. But in general, like looking at the companies we work with, looking at, are you finding your success because your company is reactive to customer needs or proactive to customer needs? And if you're reactive to customer needs, then scalability is going to be harder and growth is going to be harder. But if you're proactive, that means you're probably ready. And like another way of looking at that is people versus process. Are you successful because of your people solely, or are you successful because you have process? And then if you can actually say you've got that foundational process piece, then that's something that like you might actually be able to grow and sustain that growth.
And do you have a process for finding people?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Brian, back to you. I think you kind of touched on this a little bit. You've spent your career helping organizations simplify their strategies. Where do growth plans usually become too complex to execute? And how can leaders create clarity for these plans without oversimplifying?
Great visual that I think kind of helps a ton is looking at fidelity levels and thinking about a picture and how pixelated a picture is. If you look at a billboard or something like that and you go way up close to it, it's totally pixelated, right? Because to look at it from far away, it has clarity from far away, even with a low fidelity to it. But then as you get closer to something, like our phones now are like so high fidelity and they're right there in front of our face, and we need to like shoot these videos and do all these things in high fidelity because everything's closer. And so looking at your strategy and your growth plans from a standpoint of high fidelity, medium fidelity, and low fidelity, where starting with that low fidelity that gets you out to whatever time span makes sense for you, like 3 to 5 years. Personally, I think if you're going beyond 5 years, it's a like fool's quest. But you kind of look at that, get your low fidelity, and then bring it in like 2/3, get your medium fidelity, then bring it in another third and get that high fidelity. And then you can continue to increase your fidelity as you go along your path towards whatever goals you're trying to achieve.
Let's have any input on the fidelity piece of the goal strategies.
Yeah, I think this is something that we practice a lot at the corporate level that I love bringing back down. I've done a lot of work with nonprofits. So McKinsey years ago developed the 3 horizons model, right? And horizon 1 is where you're at today, what you're working on today, the core business that sustains the organization. And horizon 2 is the things that have commercial viability but don't have broad reaching success throughout the organization. Then horizon 3 is that kind of where visionaries love to play, right? It's that future state. There's no EBITDA impact. There's no real value to the organization yet. It's just somebody's idea. But I think what a lot of times kind of where we get out of sorts is when you get the flow wrong and the sequencing wrong. And to your point about fidelity, right? It's constantly coaching 70% at that horizon 1 level, right? That high fidelity in your face. It's what you're working on today. When you're building out 3 to 5 year plans, it's great to be at 5 years. That's wonderful. What are we doing today that's going to keep the operation running for 5 years so we can get to those plans? And, spending 30% of the time in horizon 2, right? That helps give you that lift, keeps those moving. And then finally 10% in that horizon 3 area. That way the visionary doesn't get lost. They don't feel like they don't get to innovate. They're not off, building motorcycles in their garage, but yet at the same time, they're still engaged in the direction of the organization. That's I think, a great point about fidelity.
That's a great way to break down the time allocations and resource allocations too. I think that can be very helpful for people, especially when they're just trying to get started and figure out how much of their time or resources to focus on those different areas. So that's a great point you made there, Josh. Justin, going back to you, you work closely with founders setting ambitious income and impact goals. How do you help leaders set growth targets that stretch them without overwhelming their capacity or their values?
You nailed it, that we want a goal that stretches us, but that's in the realm of possibility. And I think that there's an exciting idea that a lot of people champion about setting like a big, hairy, audacious goal that is unachievable, so that when you miss it, you still achieve something great. I probably believe in bringing the goal down a little bit from there to something that we believe we can actually achieve. I think having the belief that we can achieve the goal versus knowing we're setting something that's unattainable is critically important, because we behave differently when we believe in our capacity to achieve the goal. And so making sure that we're thoughtfully coming up with a number that we actually believe we can achieve and that the team believes can be achieved, that is a stretch, that is a challenge. It shouldn't feel easy. It should require a new version of us to show up to achieve the goal. And it should be within the realm of possibility enough that we can say, okay, I can see us making that happen. And there's an inspiration around the belief and a desire to find the resources and take the necessary actions to fulfill on what we believe we can achieve. And so it's different for everyone. Ultimately, like when I'm talking to entrepreneurs or leaders and asking questions about their goals, it's almost the smell test. Like, does it feel true or not? One of my mentors used to say, I hear what you're saying, but I don't believe it yet. I'm not hearing the belief in your voice, or I'm not like, it doesn't feel real. Is it really true for you? Or how passionate are you about this? Or how committed are you really? Or he would ask the question, what do you want to achieve this next year? And then they share and he's like, yeah, I hear that, but I don't really feel it. What do you really want? And sometimes asking the same question a second or a third time delivers a different answer that's more true. And so I think if we're providing that kind of leadership, even amongst our own team members, our own salespeople or producers, asking the question, and then if we don't feel like we're getting something that's true, asking the question again in another way until we get to something that there's a truth around, an inspiration around, and a belief in.
Hey, Justin, have you ever heard of Edwin Locke and Gary Latham?
I haven't.
They wrote a paper back in 2002 about how important self-belief was in an employee achieving an assigned goal. And we've all probably, I think all of us spent a little time in corporate America. If you've ever been in the back of a room when leadership announces a goal and it's a big, hairy, audacious goal, And all of a sudden from the back of the room, you hear that's telling you that you're lacking a little bit of belief. Unbeknownst to me, I actually put a company in the Inc. 5000 based significantly on the theory and the study work that's in their paper that they published.
Sound like smart guys.
It's pretty wild. I mean, it really boils down to self-belief. If your team does not believe that they can do the thing you're asking them to do, then that's the first gap you've got to cover.
I'm a big believer in asking the question, what has to be true for us to get here? It's a great way to balance the forward look with also what has to come along to achieve it. So it marries the two together really nicely, because if you're like, we're going to grow 40%, well, what does that mean? It means we need 3 more people in payroll and accounting to be able to support it. Well, great. How do we find the stage gates that allow us to step into that? And then you start moving that forward, then you really accelerate belief. Because once they hire the first one, then it's like, oh, well, we hit the first goal. Now we got 2 more to hire. That means we're on our way to that number. And so I've seen that work.
When you give somebody a goal, if they've never accomplished anything like that, and if they don't know somebody who's accomplished, I mean, personally know somebody who's accomplished that goal, you've lost 85% of the battle. So you've got to cover one of those 2 items. Otherwise, you're not going to get it done, because they get a physiological response in their gut that says, I can't do this, boss. And so you have to address that.
And to that point, Philip, I think one of the things that's important is breaking this down to the smallest actions that are going to equal that. We come up with a number. Is it defensible? And so, I'm working with a lot of startup entrepreneurs. Their goal might be $100,000 for their business. Even if it is bigger, $1 million or 10 million or 100 million, whatever the number is, breaking it down to, well, how many sales is that going to take? And how many sales calls held is it going to take to make that many sales? And how many sales calls do we need to book to actually hold that many, knowing some people will cancel or reschedule or no-show the sales call? And if we need to book that many sales calls, how many messages do we need to send to book that many calls? And if we break it down like that, oftentimes what it actually takes to achieve the big goal is smaller than we thought in the first place. The kinds of people I'm dealing with, these solopreneurs in many cases, for most of them, if they just sent out 10 messages a day and spent 30 minutes each day, Monday through Friday, they would achieve all their goals. But it's that thing that they haven't done because they haven't even tried, because they thought the goal was too heavy or too big to achieve. And they didn't break it down into small enough terms that it felt like something they could take on. And for all of us doing that for our people, helping them see exactly what it would take to achieve the goal is critically important. And we'll make it smaller in many cases than we probably imagined.
And the complement to that is, what 3 things do you do that shoot yourself in the foot?
Mm-hmm.
Write them down and stop doing them. Because sometimes part of the game is just not losing. There's a lot of ways where when you guys are talking to your clients, I'm sure they do things and they know, or they let a phone call slip an extra 24 hours. They maybe don't turn in a proposal on a Friday because they think a Monday is better. They do all of these little things that let things slip. And sometimes winning, all you have to do to win is just not shoot yourself in the foot. Mm-hmm. So I used to have my teams write down, hey, what are 3 things that if you stopped doing or stopped putting off, 3 mistakes that you make? Just write down 3 and try to not do those. Because sometimes when you're having a bad month, if you just don't do the 3 things that shoot yourself in the foot, you're going to actually end up with a better month than you thought.
Kind of parallel to that is, how do you not get distracted as you're going with these things? And honestly, I forget about it all the time. And then when I hear about it again, I'm always enamored by it again, is the Eisenhower matrix of urgent and important. I think that's just like, I'm a big believer in frameworks and tools and just mental models that help you be able to think, slow down and think, but then move quickly with it. And think that Eisenhower matrix is huge to what am I going to hand off? What am I going to focus on? What am I going to forget about?
That's one of the biggest things that we see when we go from SMB to mid-market. And even at the corporate level, there's a big struggle with delegation, right? I think getting that right at the solopreneur stage helps accelerate so much, because you've got so much on your shoulders that you're dealing with, right? You're focused on growing the business. You're focused on payroll. You're focused on client retention, all of these different things. And whatever you can learn to hand off early on, it starts making that easier and easier. And I know, Philip, you mentioned that you're on the exit side of things as well. How easy is it when they're ready to exit the organization, when they don't hold everything still on their shoulders, when it's easily delegated out? Does it become to just move to that next phase of business as well?
Yeah, if you want to exit at a decent multiple, you better A, be good at delegating, and B, have a team worth delegating to. If you have those 2 things, you might not want to exit. You might like the annuity that's coming out of that company.
That seems like a theme that keeps coming up of identifying your next generation of managers and leaders, of whether you're exiting or not. Like if you scale and you grow, like by nature, the people you have can't sustain that. You need more people, and they're either going to need to be managing people or doing different things. And so like, do you have a plan, like either internally or externally? Like, hey, if you really think you're going to grow crazy fast over the next 12 months, start interviewing now. Like it's going to take a while. Like
Yeah.
if you have faith and belief in what you're going to accomplish, like start bringing in new team members, or at least identifying who they are.
And to your point, Brian, and Josh, you brought up McKinsey. I think it was them that about 4 or 5 years ago, they published a finding. They asked a bunch of investors around the world that specialize in putting money in middle market companies, what they saw as the biggest weaknesses. And one of the top 3 was that current business owners don't have the ability to identify and develop good talent. So I would put that very definitely, it's got to be in your top 10 if it's not in your top 3.
If you're running a growing company and still handling too many operational details yourself, there's a better way forward. The Delegate or Die checklist shows you the exact tasks that drain leadership bandwidth and the simple changes that recover 15 to 30 plus hours a week. Download it free at workergenics.com/scale-smart. Now let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, such a good point. I spend a lot of time coaching leaders on building that pipeline, right? Because Brian, to your point, building that next generation of leaders is so important, because not only we all know it's expensive to hire people, and it's even more expensive to rehire somebody. But when you bring somebody along with you, when they're in the journey with you, not only, again, to Justin's point, are they bought into the vision and they're running at the same pace you are, it just makes it a lot easier to get them to buy into that vision. But then it also gives them a stake in the organization that they feel like they belong. And so retention goes up. But beyond that, it's a matter of building a runway or pipeline of talent is so critical, because it takes so long to develop some of these skill sets that you as a leader have to sit down and think, okay, if we're going to grow at this pace, and the organization looks at X size today and Y size tomorrow, what are they going to have to learn to be able to support that? So many young people, so many people entering the workforce want to know, okay, well, I'm coming in at this junior role, but what does the next role look like? And what do I need to do to get there? And so many smaller organizations really struggle to bridge that gap, and they lose people constantly because they hop to the next place that gives them that mobility, and it gives them a path forward. And so if you can really distill down, hey, you're coming in as a junior salesperson or a BDR, we're going to make you an AE in 6 months, and this is the roadmap to get there. Then they follow, again, they're bought into the vision. They're like, okay, I know where I'm going to go. I want to stay here and I want to do that. That's such a critical point that I think gets overlooked as well.
And how many business owners don't do that in the hiring conversation?
And if you have that growth, we talked about like entrepreneurs and growth mindset. Like a lot of times you go into that fallacy of like, well, I taught myself, I figured it out. Like these other people should be able to figure it out too. But like there's, a little, it's kind of trite, but I think it's valid of, okay, well, you're saying you don't want to train these people or you don't want to put the effort in, because what if they leave and I'm basically helping the next job? It's like, well, then the quip is, yeah, but what if they stay? Yeah. And then they're untrained people working for you if they stay. So like maybe like we just contribute to the general good of humanity by training people and hope to God that you've helped your team enough that they actually want to stay with you,
These are some excellent points. And Philip, I want to go back to you because your work focuses a lot on the momentum and planning with the end in mind. And I'm curious, what signals tell you early on that someone's growth plan won't hold up operationally with that end in mind, scaling?
First thing I look at actually is anecdotal. Most of the time when I'm going to do an on-site with a client for the very first time, I don't go into their business at 9 a.m. I meet them at their business at about 5:45 p.m. the night before, and we tour the office. And I look at how many desks are missing personal effects, pictures of my dog, pictures of my kids, vacation photos, that kind of thing. And then I get into looking at how well does the business owner understand the informal processes and informal communication flows in their company? Because if they don't understand that sort of random network that exists inside their business that allows things to be lubricated and allows information to flow and projects to get done, that's going to be a problem. And then I'll look next, when you talk about the money side, I want to see the budget. How tight is it? What's your contingency? Have you maxed out your credit limit? Because it's going to go wrong and you're going to need to dip into a well somewhere. And I want to know if you've got just a little bit of check of reality on your plan so that we can do that. And then the third thing I'm going to look at is, do you control your pipeline? If you don't have a process for making the phone ring and you're trying to scale and you don't know how or why that phone rings, that's another issue. So at a very high level, I'd say I probably actually go in with a checklist of things, but those would be my first three that I'm going to look at. I want an indication of culture. I want an indication of budget, and I want to know if they can make the phone ring.
Three critical checklist items. I think we've kind of touched on some of those with the earlier discussion of the fidelity and goal planning and making it be realistic. Josh, you've led large-scale transformations across various industries. Where do leaders most underestimate the execution risk when planning for scale, especially as complexity and technology increases in business?
Yeah, it's the change management side. It's the people side. So many times this project started off with, you think of an ERP implementation, right? Accounting software. It's the most critical function of a business, right? It's how payroll happens. It's how we get paid. It's how we pay people. And so many times organizations will look to start one of these. We call them the CFO killer. Why? Because the CFO comes in, he says, yeah, we're going to do this. And then we get 6 months into it, a year into it. I think they have about a 75% failure rate. And it fails out because somebody in accounting is doing something in Excel and they've done that for 5 years and it works. And then we try to digitize that whole process and nobody knows how it works. And then everything breaks down. And Philip's laughing because I feel like he knows this. He's been through it. And so
I've lived it. I've coached it. Oh my God.
So yeah, it's communication, it's change management, because you go into it with this high hope and expectation that everybody's going to be on board, everybody's going to be aligned to it, and then they start to realize there's usually three groups of people, right? There's the people that they feel like their job's getting displaced and they're going to lose it, right? 40-year veteran accountant feels like that you're trying to move her out. And she's like, no, I'm going to keep holding on to all this information. The people on the shop floor, maybe, that feel like technology is going to displace their job altogether, right? Oh, AI is going to come in and do my manufacturing job for me. And so they don't want to be participatory in it. And then you get 8 months into it and it's like, well, none of these processes work. Why? It's, well, nobody in manufacturing wanted to talk to the team and they're completely isolated from it. And then finally, the third group of people is the people that want it and they're desperate for it, but they have no clue how it works. And so they struggle just in the lift of what the technology is, right? They've been on Excel, they've been on Sage for years, or some older legacy technology, and now they're moving to something that has built-in AI features that does all this stuff. And they're like, we don't even know where to begin. And so those are kind of the common themes that I see.
That kind of modernization, it seems like it always requires good data. And so like the other piece that we're always looking at is your data normalized? Is it in a place where we can reuse it somewhere else? But, if you don't have good data, if you don't have normalized data, I mean, you could have awesome data, but if everything's a one of one and nothing's normalized, like you're screwed. Like there's nothing you can do. It's going to take you years just to get your data in place. So I think that's one of those reality checks early too, and that kind of goes back to my comment about people versus process and reactive versus proactive. Like a lot of these things are all like consistent around that idea of like normalization and something you can lean on as you need to just execute and not think.
Well, and I love what you're talking about, Josh, when you talk about finding out that somebody's doing something on an Excel spreadsheet and they've done it that way for their entire career. That's the point where I mentioned earlier that, does the business owner actually know how things get done? Because I promise you at 10 employees, it does not get done the way it was when it was you and one other person. And they get disconnected. They don't actually understand. I know that you wrote down the process and it's got 10 steps, and maybe you originally agreed that one person was going to do 1 through 5, next person was going to do 6 through 10. You left the room. And 4 weeks later, they've privately negotiated that it's actually better for the first person to do the first 4 steps. And the handoff takes now place at 4 to 5, not 5 to 6. You come in, you're rolling in, you're bringing in a new accounting system in. You're assuming that it's the way it was when you left the room. You have no idea what happened informally. You don't know what the real process is. And then you're going to drop in this new widget or this new system or method, and you're completely disconnected from the process. And that's where I see it breaking down so much. Like those folks that they're hanging on to their fiefdom because out of fear, really. And that's because we entrepreneurs, we make decisions. We can go home on a Friday, have a new idea, and by Monday morning, it's the greatest thing on earth. And we're going to do this thing. And we have no idea that we just scared half the people at work.
All these things are scalable up to like massive corporate level too, because where you're talking about a company that's got one person going to 10 or whatever, or is it a department that went from 1 to 10, or is it a team that went from 1 to 10? Like all of these concepts still play out across whatever level.
Absolutely.
What are some strategies that leadership can keep in mind when they are bringing these new goals or new plans? Maybe they need to start taking some actions in advance of even presenting the plans, but what are some of these approaches they can take to make sure that they are aware of these processes and they get that buy-in early on from their team for these changes?
One thing that I think helps with buy-in, and this may be different than what you're asking for, Harley, but to me, a structure that's been so effective for my team has been a quarterly deep dive where we spend most of the session actually just celebrating what we accomplished over the last quarter. I think this builds a lot of trust and buy-in when we begin to see each other. And I'm always pleasantly surprised every single quarter because when I'm in the day-to-day, I'm like, oh man, we're not where I want to be. And look at all these problems that we're focused on fixing every team meeting. But when it comes to that quarterly session and we write down all the celebrations, all the progress, all the successes, and we share them with each other and we call each other out for the goodness of what's already happening and we embrace the journey, I think then people recognize that we're good finders and that we can see the good that they're doing and not just focus on the problems. And when they know that every single quarter, even as we're implementing new things and certain processes are messy and mistakes are being made, that we're seeing and celebrating the progress and the goodness of who they are and what they're doing right now. And so if they feel celebrated and seen and recognized for the good they're doing, I think they're more apt to be willing to take a risk or to embrace change and to make mistakes in an environment that feels safer.
And from a safety standpoint, I think a very freeing approach is to periodically force yourself to answer the question, what if everything we're doing is wrong? And like truly, truly embrace that concept of like, what if we had to completely start over? Like, what if you sold your IP? What if you, whatever it is, but if we had to change everything we're forced to, what will we change it to? And then you have that forcing function of understanding like, oh, are these opportunities we hadn't been thinking about? Like now that we're in this new place, or it gives you like litmus test of, no, what we're doing is still better than this other thing. But giving people the space to answer the question and kind of like forcing them to answer the question, what if everything we're doing is wrong? It allows them to say the emperor has no clothes on stuff because you're asking them to.
That's a good point, opening up the floor to kind of imply that you don't already have all the answers and welcome the feedback from the team can be super important. I'm actually listening to a book, audiobook right now called Thanks for the Feedback. And it's like these topics we're talking about are, really covered well in that book. So it's one I recommend the audience. If you haven't checked it out, great way to identify, especially for leadership, trying to give feedback to teams and get feedback back from your teams on these types of topics. It's back to the whole group. I got a group question for everyone here. We're going to kind of just skip ahead a little, do the time. And this is going to like a trade-off question. What's one hard decision that you've made or advised on that protected the long-term scalability, even though it felt uncomfortable in the moment?
For me, it just comes down to letting the wrong person go. And oftentimes, I probably hold on to somebody longer than I should because I've got love and care for them. But when I've done things the right way and made important decisions, it was recognizing who we were going to be and who we needed and did we have the right people in the seats. And the sooner we make the decision to make the change, if it's not a fit, the better. And that's one of the hard decisions that we're called to make. And there's a big part of me, it's like, oh man, I wish that wasn't on me. That's why we're the owner. That's why we're the leader of the business, is so that we can make those decisions. And when relationships and people are involved, it's tricky. We want to try to end, I think, in a really honorable, loving way. At least that's my value system around it. But that's always going to feel bad. And it's always going to be really important.
I've had to tell more than one owner not to scale, that they were, 12, 18 months out from being able to do it. If you've got a mess, if you're still micromanaging, if you don't have a right hand, heck, if you can't take 2 weeks off and disappear, you're not ready to scale. You're only going to copy your mess in a different town or across town or in another spot. You're going to regret that. So telling somebody not to scale when as entrepreneurs, we're kind of wired to do crazy things like that. That's hard for them to hear. And hard for them to hear why.
Yeah, I think another big one is having to tell somebody that their pet project, their idea is not viable and feasible, right? I can think of working on a project where a well-known bourbon distributor and manufacturer, one of their VPs was like, yeah, we could enter the vodka market. It's X amount of dollars, and if we accomplished 1% of it, we'd have so much money. And we had to look at him and go, You've been in this space for over 100 years. Why would you pivot to something? Yes, sure, there may be money there, but that's not what your brand's known for. Sometimes bringing focus back to the organization is a really difficult conversation, especially when entrepreneurs and VPs and senior managers have great ideas on paper, but when you really press them, there is no substantive value there. And sometimes that's a hard conversation to have. It's not going to work.
It's such a different space now where so many people are working remotely and so many people like quote unquote demand to work remotely, but sometimes that works or doesn't work. But I think like one of the big challenging decisions like I personally had to make was around our space. And like we actually doubled our space because we wanted to make sure that when the team came together, that felt like there was a home and felt like there was an environment for them to actually connect and to have that home centering kind of location. And it's an expensive thing to do when you're not using it 90% of the time. But I really do think it's that magnet, that thing that like people can center around. Do you want to make one comment on Justin's like one thing that helped me a ton? Like, and I'm not saying you're not doing this, but like just around the firing people is totally agree with everything you said about compassion and it's hard and like it's never not hard, right? But the thing that's like really was like a turning point for me a while back that's just always helps me when I'm in that situation is knowing that that one person is probably affecting 5 other people. And so like by not letting that person go, I'm actually doing more hardship to 5 of my good employees versus the one other one. And so like by avoiding that conflict, I'm multiplying the harm that's happening there. And then like truly believe like if someone's not doing well, there is a place for everyone. Like everyone has a story, everyone has a place, and like they just need to find their place. And so sometimes it's like the best thing you can do is help them find that next place.
That's great wisdom. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, it's amazing sometimes what you miss when you finally do release that person. I had an experience where we had a salesperson, best salesperson in the whole organization, and they just weren't a culture fit. They were always negative, always dragging everybody down, and finally released them and had 5 or 6 other people from different departments come by and say, "I'm so glad you did that. They were impacting me this way." Didn't even know that. And so the massive drag to the organization's culture. But yeah, it's such a critical point.
Well, we have covered some amazing topics and extracted a huge amount of wisdom from you guys today. One final lightning round question, just answer with a couple sentences. What's the most important principle leaders should remember when planning to be scalable for growth this year?
I'll go.
Justin, we'll start up with you, or whoever's ready to go can jump right in.
You and your team, your leadership team, better be able to grow and learn as fast as you want your business to grow.
Anyone else has something they want to share, just jump right in.
I'd say value the truth seekers, like the people who challenge and question you. Get rid of the sycophants and value the truth seekers, because that's the only way you're actually going to be able to grow and achieve.
I'd say it would be force data into every conversation. Every time you have an idea, try to find the data within the organization or within the market to back it up so that you can make a truly qualitative and quantitative decision.
To me, I'm thinking about 2 things. One, building the simplest outcome-focused plan possible. The more complexity, the more things that can go wrong. And I understand some businesses require the complexity, but as simple as it possibly can be and as outcome-focused as the plan can be, the better. And for me as a sales guy, we have to have the right salespeople and the right sales process in place. Philip talked about earlier, making sure the phone's ringing. Like, what's our process and plan for leads and sales and who are the people who are going to handle those leads and those sales? Critically important to every company.
Awesome. Thank you again for joining us, guys. If people want to continue the conversation with you or connect with you online, we'd love to give everyone the opportunity to share. It's the best way to connect with them online, starting with you, Josh.
Yeah. So just visit us at santiagocompany.com. That's the easiest way to find out what we do and get a hold of us, or you can find me on LinkedIn at Josh Santiago KC.
You can find me online at thenumbersadvisors.com. That's the best place where you'll get an idea of how our advisory firm operates. And then on LinkedIn, I actually have a custom, and you can look me up at Your Goals Achieved. Excuse me.
Awesome. Thank you. And Brian.
You can find us at estate4.com, spelled out, pictures worth 1,000 words. So there you go.
There you go.
Yeah, and LinkedIn, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn as well.
And Justin.
I'm easy to find online on social media as well, but The best way to connect if you want to continue the conversation is to accept a gift I'd like to give everyone, which is a free PDF of our 10-step sales process that's been so effective for us and our clients. You can get that by texting sales to 55444. Just the word sales to 55444. It's going to give you the free gift. It'll put you on our email list, and myself or someone on our team will text you. And if you want to talk with me personally, just say, hey, I want to talk to Justin, and we'll get on a call and we'll get to know each other.
Thank you so much to our panelists today for the clarity and real world insight that you've shared with our audience. And thank you to everyone who joined us live. Remember, scale isn't just about growing faster, it's about building the structure and leadership capacity to support that growth without breaking what matters. We'll see you all next time on Executive Edge Live and on the Scale Smart, Grow Fast podcast.